grade 12 economics. Good afternoon. My name is Mr. Mhlongo and I'm back here with you on economics lesson. Remember that this lesson is brought to you by Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery. Today we continue with economic pursuit, which is our topic number 4. And as we continue, we are covering under economic growth and development. We are doing economic growth and development policies. We are also covering North-South divide as well as globalization challenges. There will be assessments at the end of the lesson that will be guiding you on how to respond in some typical questions for economic growth and development. Please join me. Let's see what I have in the pocket for you. Lesson objectives are as follows. So at the end of this lesson, you will be able to discuss in detail South African economic growth and development policies. If we say you will be able to discuss in detail, that means this is a part of the essay section C. You will be able to briefly discuss North-South divide. The lesson will also equip you on being able to briefly discuss globalization challenges faced by South Africa or developing countries in the world. As for our previous lessons, it is believed that you already know the following content. Economic growth and development, you are able to give the difference between the two, and you are able to briefly discuss economic growth, measure economic growth, and briefly discuss economic development and measure economic development. We are also able now to discuss or to explain importance of economic growth and economic development in the country. Okay, we continue. And then also you are informed about growth and development policies that were covered last year in grade 11. You know characteristics of developing countries, which are linked to South divide. You know features of developed countries, which are linked to North divide. This is the lesson of the day. Economic growth and development, which is something that we are already informed about. And then North-South divide, which is believed to be the world division between developing countries and developed countries. Remember that if we talk about North, we mean first world or developed countries. If we talk about the South, we mean developing countries. So we normally say developed countries are found on the Northern Hemisphere, even though we have some developed that are in the Southern Hemisphere. And then developing countries are found in the Southern Hemisphere. If we talk about North-South divide, we mean the development gap between countries. So others call it development continuum gap. Then also globalization challenges. Here we are checking challenges faced by developing nations under globalization, which include South Africa. They have some challenges that include the trade. They cannot trade effectively under globalization. They cannot grow easily under globalization. Also, they are faced by an issue of poverty. There is also an environmental challenge that is posed by developed nations as they produce more goods and services. They burn fossil fuels. For that reason, countries are affected negatively. That's why we have an issue of climate change and global warming. So the first part will be economic policies, which include growth and development since 1994. Remember, South Africa was introduced to democracy in 1994. So the democratic government intervened then to try and ensure that it brings redress policies to ensure that everyone get equal opportunity economically and socially, with the aim of reducing economic and social inequalities. So these are the policies we are discussing. Some of them are economic policies, some of them are the growth policies, some of them are development policies. But all in all, they do link because they have the same objective. Should the policy be for the growth, it always leads to the development, because when we have a growth, automatically there will be more income that can be used to develop the country even further. So economic policies formed since 1994 to date are reform policies which have common objective, which is mainly to improve social welfare or well-being of the economy. So these policies that were formed since 1994, the primary aim was to improve the wellness of the economy and the wellness of the society. reducing imbalances of the past that were existing, reducing economic and social inequalities. So those are the policies that I'm talking about. Some were introduced to redress the apartheid economy by giving priority to former marginalized people. So some of these policies that will be discussed here in detail were formed to redress or to transform the economy, ensuring that those people that were marginalized, which were excluded from participating in the economic mainstream, get an opportunity to participate easily in the economy. The democratic economic policies, policies aim at building a united, non-sexist and non-racial society. So these policies were formed to ensure that the economy and society are not discriminatory, are non-sexist, are non-racially. They give people equal opportunities regardless of color, race, or gender. So they also aim at building a single integrated economy in South Africa where poverty is eradicated with economic equalities. So we know that we had an issue of high level of inequalities with poverty also, which is still existing now. So these policies that were formed were aimed at ensuring that they eradicate those inequalities and also reduce poverty that was existing by providing or creating enough opportunities for people that were marginalized so that they could participate in the economy. So these are the policies. We have RDP, which is known as Reconstruction and Development Program. So it was formed in 1994. This policy is a development policy or developmental policy. What was the aim of this policy when it was formed in 1994? The RDP was formed to ensure that people are having access to basic needs. Remember, before 1994, Black people were neglected, so they did not have access to some basic needs such as housing, electricity, water supply, sanitation, etc. So when it was formed, it was there as a transformational developmental policy to ensure that Black people can be able to access proper housing so that they could be safe and protected. Electrification, having access to electricity, water supply, having clean and running water, and then also sanitation. So it focuses on basic needs, basically. And then growth, employment, and redistribution. This one is known as a growth policy. It was formed in 1996 to complement what we call RDP. When this policy was formed, the main aim was to ensure that the country is able to achieve its macroeconomic objectives, to ensure macroeconomic stability by achieving economic growth and also achieving what we call the full employment, ensuring price stability, ensuring economic equity, and also improving the currency of the country without BOP disequilibrium at the same time. And then also we have the broad-based Black economic empowerment, which is known as a triple BE. Remember, triple BE came to replace the BEE. We had a Black economic empowerment that was initially formed with the aim of giving the privilege and priority to Black people so that they can participate easily in the economic mainstream. But triple BE was formed because of the fronting that was done. So people used to be involved in fraud, faking that Black people are owning some businesses or companies so they could qualify for BEE funding. But then it was discovered, then it was then enhanced even further to what? To triple BE, ensuring that it's not only focusing on business, but people can also attain skills. Black people can also attain skills. Black people also can also be hired and get opportunities that are at the higher level of management. Also promoting procurement, to ensure that Black people are able to own some positions or assets that are important for the development of the person. And then also we have EPWP, which is known as Expanded Public Work Program, which was formed in 2004. This is a developmental policy, even though it can link to growth. Why was this policy formed? This policy was formed to improve economic livelihood in neglected areas where there's high level of unemployment and poverty. So this policy was formed to ensure that it improved the infrastructure or maintain existing infrastructure in areas that are neglected, where there's high level of unemployment and poverty. Also ensuring that people in those areas are able to get job opportunities. As they get those jobs, they're able to attain relevant skill that can be used even if contracts have lapsed in future. And then we also talk about the NSDS, which is known as National Development Strategy. National Skill Development Strategy, I mean. So this one was formed in 2005 as a part of development. This one, it aimed at improving what we call human development resource in the workplace, ensuring that people or workers or labor force is able to get ongoing training or workshops at the workplace so that they can remain efficient. And then we have ASGISA, which is Accelerated and Shared Growth Initiative for South Africa. It was also formed in 2005 with the aim of ensuring that there's an improvement in investment on critical infrastructure. Remember, if we talk about the critical infrastructure, we mean infrastructure that is important or that is very much necessary for a certain economic activity to occur, meaning we cannot perform a certain economic activity without having that particular kind of the infrastructure available. Then we have GIPSA, which is Joint Initiative on Priority Skills Acquisition. It's a development pool that was formed in 2006 to ensure that South African people are able to attain relevant skills so that they can be marketable and employable. And then also we have the New Growth Path NGP, which was formed in 2010. It was formed to ensure effective economic growth within the country. It targeted to create millions of jobs by 2020. And then we have NDP, National Development Plan, which was formed in 2012 as a development policy to ensure that it improves skill acquisition, reduces poverty, increase employment opportunities by 2030. And then we have Small Business Development Program Promotion Program, SBDPP. It's a growth policy. It focuses on funding SMMEs, small, micro, and medium enterprises within the economy so that they can be able to create enough jobs and also allowing people to be self-employed, improving what we call the economy internship so that those people can be able to grow on their own and also establish their own initiatives to be bigger industries within the country through that funding of a Small Business Development Promotion Program. So RDP, Reconstruction and Development Program. So the RDP is an anti-poverty strategy, meaning if we say anti-poverty, we mean it is against poverty. It is there to combat or get rid of poverty. It was formed in 1994 that aims at eradicating consequences of apartheid by meeting people's basic needs. Remember, should people be able to meet their basic needs, that means poverty has been alleviated or combated within the country. So it aims at ensuring that people are able to meet their basic needs instead of them living below the poverty line. This is the economic development strategy that aims at improving social welfare. So as a development, it improves social welfare with priority to the provision of basic needs to former marginalized South Africans. So it aims at ensuring that those former marginalized South Africans are able to access basic needs such as water, electricity, housing, or shelter, as well as sanitation. So the RDP is an integrated, coherent socio-economic policy framework. It seeks to mobilize countries' resources towards the final eradication of apartheid and the building of a democratic, non-racial and non-sexist future. It focuses on ensuring that there are enough resources that are fairly distributed so that people that were marginalized can be able to participate easily. If we talk about eradicating the apartheid lifestyle and economy, it ensures that those that were marginalized are able to have access to the basic needs, are able to, to participate easily in the economic mainstream without any restriction that is put in place. So economic imbalances were widening, so it was necessary for the government to implement redress policy focusing on improving lives of marginalized. So before 1994, there were huge economic inequalities. Most of black people were ignored or neglected in a way that some people were beneficiaries in the economy while others were mainly losing because their resources in their areas were extracted or taken away from them. So the provision of basic resources, which measure social welfare such as electrification or electricity, clean running water, and sanitation, was ignored in some human settlements. So black people could not access water, electricity, as well as sanitation before 1994. So when the RDP was formed, it put priority to human settlements where black people are not having those basic resources to improve their welfare. Most of underprivileged people were unskilled, which hampered them from great opportunities to fairly participate in the economy. Since people were not having enough skills because of lack of education, they could not participate easily and fairly in the economy. So they were neglected or sidelined because of those policies. High level of poverty on the marginalized was the main concern. So people were marginalized, and those people that were marginalized or sidelined were characterized by a high level of poverty because they could not afford their basic needs, meaning that they were living below the poverty line. If we talk about the poverty line, we simply indicate the minimum income one should be having in a country to afford the basic living. Should you have income below that amount of money, that means you are living below poverty line, meaning you are within an absolute poverty, because we have an absolute poverty which is severe, and relative poverty, which is better. That's when now you are able to afford your basic needs. So objectives of RDP was to meet basic needs. So the first priority to begin with was to meet the basic needs of the people: jobs, land, housing, water, electricity, telecommunication, transport, and clean and healthy environment, nutrition, healthcare, and welfare. These are the objectives. As for the basic needs, all of these are the basic needs that were aimed to be met by what we call the RDP. If you can check, RDP has been able to ensure that there's a proper provision of housing to some of our South Africans, even though not everyone have received, but most of people have received houses from the government through RDP program. And then also have experienced the installation of electricity in most of rural areas, in which, for which during the apartheid, those areas were not having electricity. A developing human resource. So it also aims at ensuring that people are trained and skilled enough so that they can participate in the economic mainstream. So RDP is the people-centered program, meaning it focuses on people or improving wellness of people. It aimed at involving the decision-making process, implementation in new job opportunities requiring new skills, and the managing and governing of the society. We continue building the economy. So removing the factor that prohibit the growth in the economy, aimed at promoting industry, trade and commerce, and resource-based industries to upgrade infrastructure, and then also to reform the financial sector and to address labor as well as workers' rights. In building the economy, programs dealing with the following areas are dealt with: linking construction and development, industry, trade and commerce, resource-based industries, upgrading infrastructure, and labor and workers' rights. We continue. Democratizing the state, ensuring that people are buying into the democracy. They are not left out so that they could understand their rights and their responsibilities. So the aim is to create accountable and transparent processes and structure for national, provincial, and local government, as well as civil society. Implementing the RDP. This involves building the government capacity and creating ways to coordinate the activities between departments and the various levels of government by implementing the coordination structures, planning frameworks, and financing the RDP. Create a dynamic economy that created new and sustainable jobs. So alleviate poverty, low wages, and extreme inequalities in wages and wealth. Address economic imbalances and structural problems in the economy. Integrate South Africa's economy into the world economy by using sustainable domestic manufacturing capacity and increase the export potential. We know that we have achieved such. We have been able to ensure that our economy is growing through export-oriented goods and services. Address uneven development within the regions of South Africa and between the countries of Southern Africa. Ensure that no one suffers discrimination on the basis of race or gender. Develop the human resource capacity of all South Africans. If we develop human resource, we want people to be skilled enough. Democratize the economy and empower historically oppressed, ensuring that those people that were oppressed or marginalized or neglected are able to achieve or to understand that democracy and participate in the economic mainstream. Evaluation. We check the success and the failure. Has it been successful? Has the government been successful on achieving objectives that were aimed by RDP? Success. It emphasized both supply side and demand side of the economy in meeting basic needs. The government created and increased the demand for goods and services. That's the first one. And then also for the success, the promotion of goods and services, the production of goods and services, public work program and infrastructure were most labor intensive, which this helped to alleviate unemployment and poverty. So most of jobs that were created through RDP were labor intensive, meaning they were employing more human resource over employing machinery, which then reduced unemployment and also reduced poverty. Social achievements, building houses, providing clean water, electrification, land reform, healthcare, and employment. We continue. What are the failures now? Economic performance was disappointing. Real GDP growth was erratic, unemployment continued, and poverty reduction and improved service delivery was not successful. The program could not reach out to all South African disadvantaged societies. Some rural areas are still, they still lack basic needs such as water supply, housing, healthcare, and electricity. Meaning it's mainly based in, in urban areas benefit them the most. But let's check. Let's add some of the points. It's been successful because the government have been able to make the provision of houses to almost 30% of South Africans that are in need of RDP houses. That's a success. And then also most of rural communities have been able to receive water, running water, as well as proper electricity and connections. So that's a part of success. South African people understand democracy very easy now because they were introduced to the school of democracy by RDP. So we go to number 2, GEA, growth, employment, and redistribution. So this one was formed in 1996 to complement the RDP. So it's a growth and development because it accommodates both. It's a growth, it's a development, because if ever there's a growth, there will obviously be a development. Focus on broadening economic growth and development by ensuring that macroeconomic objectives are met. Like I mentioned before, it ensures that there's a macroeconomic stability by meeting all macroeconomic objectives. Here was aimed at strengthening the economic development, increasing employment, redistributing income, and creating socio-economic opportunities for all poor people. So it aimed to ensure that we don't have economic and social inequalities by creating jobs for everyone. The aims are as follows. GEA was formed to promote export-oriented economic growth, ensuring that our growth is having the part of exports. Normally, exports are dominating so that we could earn the foreign currency. To increase employment and stimulate economic growth through foreign investment, meaning attracting the foreign direct investment into the South African economy so that there could be more employment opportunities because our local firms are still in fact. Price stability and exchange rate stability are some of the aims of GEA. Ensuring that prices are not increasing or decreasing over time. Prices are not inconsistent or volatile. Also ensuring that the exchange rate or the currency of the country does not appreciate or depreciate over time. It is stable as much as it can appreciate. It appreciates at the lower rate, not every day at the same time. Here aim to promoting more active participation of the private sector and improve economic growth. To ensure a reduced budget deficit. Remember, the country has faced the budget deficit for a longer period of time. So GEA was there to ensure that budget deficit is being trimmed. To ensure fair distribution of income. Remember, it aimed to ensure there is fair income distribution. So the government have tried to ensure it achieves such, but at times it could not exceed. Evaluation, the success, what's good that has been achieved. GEA was successful on achieving price stability through inflation targeting of between 3 to 6%. So the inflation target has been achieved because inflation moved within the range of 3 to 6% right now. It achieved greater financial discipline and reduced budget deficit. So it managed to reduce budget deficit that was existing by then, whereby the country's budget with money that is not available, that will be borrowed, than money that it has, even though it has increased lately. The government introduced various economic redistribution measures to try and reduce economic inequalities. So we have such the likes of social transfers that are in place to reduce economic inequalities so that even people that are marginalized can be able to earn the basic living. Since the introduction of GEA, the functionality of export promotion policy was evident and the trade deficit on the current account, on the BOP of current account was slightly reduced. We check the failure. It has not been successful for the following reasons. Economic freedom for most of South Africans has not been achieved. Income gaps and economic inequalities widens. We have an issue of high level of economic inequalities in South Africa. For that reason, we can say GEA has not been successful because it has not been able to reduce economic inequalities that are existing. Instead, there's a wide gap between rich and the poor, between working class and the middle class in South Africa. So few people are holding on more economic resources, while more people are holding on less economic resources. Exchange rate instability remains as a major concern or challenge, which makes South Africa to fail to trade effectively in the globalization. It is very much vulnerable because most of our exports become relatively cheap, but imports become very much expensive because our currency is weak compared to those of developed nations. South African financial discipline shows inconsistency since the state debts are roaming around 60% of the main budget. So the state is still challenged in here, has not been able to achieve because the debts of the state are still very, very high. They are above 60%, which is our benchmark. South African economic growth has been below 6% since 1996. We know that GEA aimed at achieving 6% economic growth, but since 1996, the country could not be able to achieve the 6% economic growth. Unemployment remains as a critical challenge in South Africa, which has resulted in high level of social and economic instability. We have the high level of social instability as well as economic instability. You know, whenever in the society people are embarking into protest or strike needing basic services, that simply means there is a failure in there because it aimed at reducing unemployment rate, but it has not been able to reduce unemployment rate at the highest level. We go to ASGISA, Accelerated and Shared Growth Initiative for South Africa. So it was formed in 1995. 2005. ASGISA is an anti-poverty strategy, meaning it aims at ensuring that there is no poverty. People are well equipped so that they can be able to earn the basic living. It replaced GEA that was existing or that was formed in 1996. It was formed to introduce strategies and policies and intervention to reduce poverty. Reducing poverty and unemployment are key focus areas for ASGISA. So the above objectives would be met through investment in labor-intensive industries to create an employment for less skilled labor force. The aims of ASGISA aimed to halve unemployment to 28% by 2014. So the aim was to reduce unemployment. So the employment when it was formed was 28%. It aimed to halve it to 14%. So it was aiming at to achieve increase in economic growth by 6% in 2014, which has not been successful because the country is still struggling to reach up to at least 2% per annum. Improve infrastructure investment to create good business environment for local and foreign businesses, ensuring that there is availability of proper infrastructure for businesses to be able to be attracted in South African economy and export goods and services. To promote private sector investment with priority in tourism, business processing, and biofuels because they are labor intensive. So it was there to promote labor intensive industries that could employ workers over employing machinery. Increase investment in skill development through education, ensuring that the youth is able to acquire proper education on time so that it could be skilled. Then we continue with the success now. Has it been successful? Yes. South Africa has achieved better infrastructural development, which has opened opportunities for local and foreign investment. We know that infrastructure in South Africa since 1994 has been improved. We have world-class airports, we have seaports, we have varieties of infrastructure that are available in South African economy because of what? Because of ASGISA. Labor-intensive job opportunities slightly increased in targeted industries to accommodate less skilled workforce. And then the failure. It has not been successful because ASGISA failed to halve unemployment to 28% by 2014. So it failed. Unemployment remains high until today. It failed to meet economic objective of achieving at least 6% of economic growth by 2014. Could not achieve such. Inequalities and poverty has increased in South Africa over the past years. So remember, South Africa is one of countries in the world with highest economic inequalities. So that means the ASGISA has not been successful at all for that reason. Youth unemployment remains as a major concern which continues to cause social instability. We know that most of the youth is unemployed in South Africa. That has led to social instability. If we talk about social instability, we mean social protests and crime going on in our communities caused by the high level of unemployment. And then we have the NGP, which is New Growth Path. New Growth Path is the growth and development policy formed in 2010 or 2010 to reduce level of poverty, create jobs, and reduce economic inequalities. That is NGP. It aimed at improving cooperation and forge better relations with African countries, ensuring that South Africa is able to interact economically with other African countries. To improve relations with BRICS countries. So one of the aims was to ensure that South Africa is able to improve its relations with some of the BRIC countries that are available globally. To promote more labor-intensive economy so that there can be high level of so that the high level of unskilled workers could be decreased. So the aim was to ensure that labor-intensive economy is promoted so that people that are unemployed could be employed to earn the basic living. Identifying areas where employment creation is possible on a large scale as a result of substantial changes in conditions in South Africa and globally. To create millions of new jobs in South Africa, the South Africa needs. To deepen the domestic and regional market by growing employment, increasing incomes, and undertaking other measures to improve equity and improve distribution. To widen the market for South African goods and services through a stronger focus on exports to the region and other rapidly growing economies. Restructuring land reform to support smallholder schemes with comprehensive support around infrastructure, marketing, finance, and extension services. Upgrading employment in commercial agriculture, especially through improved worker voice measures to support growth in commercial farming. Increasing or accelerating exploitation of mineral services by ensuring an effective review of the minerals rights regime. Phasing support for manufacturing to encourage activities that can generate employment. Aim to create 5 million of jobs by 2020 and bring about new, more inclusive, labor absorbing and efficient economy. So the success. Has it been successful? So the New Growth Path was able to eliminate unemployment through the implementation of labor-intensive programs. So it managed to ensure that it reduces unemployment slightly. It succeeded to forge closer ties with BRICS countries, which improved the trade relations between South Africa and themselves. So that has helped a lot. So the failure has not been successful. South Africa saw worse decline of employment in 2020. We know that by 2020, we had an issue of COVID-19. For that reason, there was a highest level of unemployment because of lockdown. Firms shut down, some of them, because of they could not be able to function. Poverty and inequality widens in South Africa, resulting to further social instability. Jobs created were not substantive or substantial. They were part-time jobs. New Growth Path could not succeed to reduce unemployment to 15% or 14% as planned, with South Africa's unemployment rate at 2.9% in the first quarter of 2025, according to Stats SA. NDP, National Development Plan, this one is Vision 2030. So a strategy to increase access to high quality and relevant education and training, as well as skill development opportunities, including workplace learning and experience to enable effective participation in the economy and society by all South Africans and reducing economic and social inequalities. So these are some objectives of what we call of NDP. Most of the National Development Plan objectives are planned to be achieved by 2030. So it's difficult to evaluate, but so far we can say some of the things that were aimed here have not been achieved, but we can also have a voice by 2030 because it will lapse in 2030 unless it can be maybe added further to 2035. The NDP plan objectives enforce economic development as they focus on social welfare and less inequalities. Strategies of NDP raising employment through faster economic growth, ensuring that we have high level of employment by ensuring we have increasing economic growth, improving the quality of education, ensuring that South African people are able to acquire higher education so that they can be marketable and employable, skill development and innovation, building the capacity of the state to play a developmental and transformative role. The NDP aims to eliminate poverty. Yes, it ensures that there is no poverty in South Africa, even though we are still facing an issue of poverty, but it has been reduced since the formation of NDP. Reduce inequality by 2030, ensuring that inequality that are existing have been eradicated by 2030. Increase economic participation of marginalized groups to better standards of living. According to the plan, South Africa can realize these goals by drawing on the energies of its people, growing an inclusive economy, building capabilities, enhancing the capacity of the state, and promoting leadership and partnership throughout the society. National Development Plan we're doing an evaluation now, is an ongoing strategy which has not reached its main objective as yet. It has not been able. South Africa is experiencing widening inequalities, with the country rated as one of the most unequal countries in the world. That's a challenge. So we have these strategies and policies, but inequality remains the same, remains highest, because now it's black people that are having access to more resources against other black people. Government redistribution measures are not enough to close the existing and growing gap between middle class and working class, as well as lower class. It is not easy. The current economic condition indicate economic instability. This makes marginalized groups to be even more vulnerable in South African economy. The country's employment capacity has declined over the past 3 years, which increased poverty even further. Remember, when people are not employed, poverty will be increasing. Then we move to GIPSA. The Joint Initiative Priority on Skills Acquisition is a developmental policy or program launched in 2006 to address issues regarding the unemployment and shortage of skills workforce. This is the skill empowerment arm. So it aims to ensure that people are able to acquire skills so that they can be marketable and employable. Launched in 2006 to address the country's chronic problem areas such as unemployment and skill shortage. These are still a problem in South Africa until today. The aim is to identify urgent skills needs and quick and effective solutions, such as special training programs, re-engaging retirees, those that have retired are brought back to improve skills for people, and drawing immigrants with the necessary skill, as well as to focus on developing the skills. The main aim is to ensure that people are employable and marketable. Improving the infrastructure. Evaluation. Skill development has been on the top of South Africa's government objectives. So the government has always been trying to ensure that people are obtaining relevant skills that are needed for them to be employable and marketable. Various human resource development strategies have been implemented, and some are currently in process to equip unskilled individuals so that they become productive citizens. The introduction of SETA, which is known as Sector of Education and Training Authority, has skills based on labor-intensive opportunities. So in this situation, youth is getting opportunity to go to TVET colleges and work or do courses practically instead of dealing with the theory the most. Unemployment, however, remains as a major concern for the nation. It sits at 32%, 32.9% in the quarter one. That is 2025, right now we're talking about. EPWP. This is the Expanded Public Work Program. So it's a nationwide government intervention strategy to create employment using labor-intensive methods and give people skills they can use to find jobs when their contract on EPWP are done. Like I mentioned, they give people skills in the area. Those people will be skilled and obtain those skills, then they can be used. After contract has lapsed, they can be using them to be self-employed under EPWP, if ever they were under EPWP. This program is a key government initiative which contributes to government policy priorities in terms of decent work and sustainable livelihood, education, health, rural development, food security, land reform, and the fight against crime and corruption. So the EPWP aims to achieve decent employment through inclusive economic growth. So it wants to be inclusive, meaning that everyone should be participating in the economic growth. Labor-intensive method which allow the drawing of a significant number of participants into the program to do the work. Used to provide infrastructure to rural areas. We know that EPWP is there to maintain existing infrastructure to rural areas. Let's evaluate the success. EPWP has been functional to give opportunities in underprivileged areas or people where there's high level of unemployment and poverty. People have been able to achieve skills that they can be using in future after EPWP program have lapsed. People employed under the program have managed to acquire skills which allow them to be self-employed after the projects. Jobs created have been labor-intensive, which has contributed to unemployment relief. So people have been getting those jobs under labor-intensive. The failure. EPWP jobs have not been substantial. When projects lapse, people immediately become unemployed. So it has not been able to create full-time jobs or permanent jobs. Jobs that are created have been taking the minimum of 8 months or maximum of 8 months. Of 8 months, which becomes a challenge because after contract have lapsed, those people will go and be unemployed. We move to the broad-based Black economic empowerment, triple BE. So the triple BE replaced BE in 2014 due to notable weaknesses. Challenges of Black economic empowerment were grounded on fronting. So people were fronting with other people, like even now it's happening. The intended recipients of triple BE were not reaping the benefits it was originally intended to. Only those that were rich were able to reap the benefits. The incorrect people were benefiting through procurement policy, while former marginals were used to front for those that were benefiting. That was unfair. That's why it was closed. BE could not have sound impact on improving economic power of Black people and reduce economic inequalities. Could not have much impact. Aims. So continue. Aims at improving economic participation of South African marginalized people, allowing them to participate easily in the economy. It focuses on ensuring that they procure and get opportunities to participate in the economy at the higher level. Land restitution and redistribution have been conducted in terms of set goals under triple BE. Triple BE aims at implementation of inclusive economic policies within the larger goal of national empowerment, targeting historically disadvantaged people such as Black people, women, the youth, rural communities, and disabled people. They are highly targeted to be beneficiaries of triple BE because they were neglected. That's why this policy also redress activities of apartheid. Triple BE, what are the aims of triple BE now? Create dimensions with our economic landscape and multiple levels. At multiple levels through the following: employment equity, ensuring that people are getting jobs regardless of color, race, or gender. And then socio-economic development, improving the development or wellness of people in their communities. Skills development, ensuring that people are able to acquire skills even when they are already in the workplace so that they can be efficient in the workplace. Preferential procurement, allowing people or Black people basically to be able to procure, to own some basic resources or assets in the economy. Enterprise development, ensuring that it develops some enterprises that are existing within the economy, which are owned by Black people. Some critical objectives: empower local and rural communities to have equal access to economic opportunities, to increase access to infrastructure, skill training programs, and economic activities. Improve human resource development of Black people through programs such as learnerships. Empower Black people to manage and or own businesses by including Black women, workers, communities, and cooperatives, etc. Promote investment that lead to broad-based participation in the economy. So it aims to ensure that investment that are created can broaden the participation of former marginalized people in the economy. We continue with evaluation. It has been successful. It continues to actively it continues to be actively used as a reform policy because it gives the privilege to the Black people to procure and own. Then the scope of triple BE is broader than the one of BE because it focuses beyond management and ownership. It focuses also on the job creation, ensuring that Black people are able to participate effectively in the economy. Introduction of triple B has endorsed many Black-owned businesses into the procurement. There are so many business people that have grown in South African economy because of triple BE and procurement. Small, micro, and medium enterprises appear as a future of South African economy as they are given financial support. So SMMEs are the main beneficiaries because they get the financial support from what you call the triple BE, so that they can be able to create job opportunities. It has not been successful. Political interference have seen triple BE funding benefiting those in political power than those who are marginalized. That's why we have huge economic inequalities, because people that are in politics are the ones that are mainly benefiting from these programs through using fronting, but those that are in it are not benefiting. Corruption remains as a major concern since those in power use fronting to benefit from the triple BE funding. So they use fronting, meaning that they use other people or their relatives as the false owners of the business so that they can qualify for triple BE certificate. The process of to qualify and acquire procurement is not made clear to all small businesses. Businesses in rural areas are not beneficiaries because they are not fully informed on how they can do to get to apply for the triple BE funding. Introduction of the economic redress policy have seen huge economic inequalities between Black people, white politicians becoming business owners, while marginalized people remain as followers. So it has led to high level of improvement for the rich people and politicians, but for people on the ground, it has not worked for them because there have been a high level of fronting whereby politicians will be pushing their family members to be as owners of companies while they're using them. They're the actually owners of companies. NSDS, National Skill Development Strategy. So it's a strategy that is aiming to increase access to high quality and relevant education as well as training and skill development opportunities. It focuses on improving skill for the people in the workplace by enforcing high quality of education. It includes workplace learning. If we talk about workplace learning, that's when people or workers are being workshopped at workplace and experience to enable effective participation in the economy and society by all South Africans and reduce inequalities. It aims at addressing the challenge of skill shortage in South Africa. It focuses on ensuring that we have enough skills that are even critical in the country. It was developed as a result of the formation of Skill Development Act and focused on trade as nursing, plumbers, welders, electricians, finance, and administration. It managed to improve the level of provision of semi-skilled workers in the labor market. A sector of education and training authorities improve skill acquisition. So our youth is able to get skills in the under-sitters. Youth is provided, it's provided to them with an opportunity to be marketable and employable. So youth in here can even, when they leave the school after passing grade 9, they're able to go to sitters or FET colleges where they can get relevant skills or use their skills using handwork besides learning more about the theory, because this one is more practical. Sector of Education and Training Authority. This became a mechanism to alleviate poverty to a certain degree. So it has been able to allow people to be marketable or employable to get jobs, and then poverty has been slightly alleviated, even though it's still very high. Lack of skills, however, remains as a major concern in the economy since there is still very high rate of unskilled people. The Small Business Support Promotion Program. So SBSPP was formed in 2014 to support and thereby promote the growth of small businesses, which are believed to be SMMEs. It ensures that new entrepreneurs are properly monitored, supported, and nurtured to encourage small, micro, and medium enterprises. And then we continue. SMMEs are acknowledged by the government as being critical to the growth and as a future of South African economy. Our president sees them as the future of the economy because in the future there will be bigger businesses that will be creating enough jobs. The support program has seen many small businesses exposure. Labor-intensive small businesses have increased over the past years, leading to less dependence on employment, but creating jobs for the unemployed. So SMMEs have been able to create jobs, or people that are owning those small businesses have been able to create enough jobs for some people in their communities, which has led to them accessing income for better living. Why are SMMEs important? Small, micro, and medium enterprises. So the small business sector employs large part of the labor force compared to other size of businesses. So SMMEs are employing most of people or most of the labor force in South Africa. The average capital cost of job created in SMMEs sector is lower than the big business sector. And then it allows for more competitive markets where consumers will benefit from a wider variety of goods at more competitive or lower prices. Remember, if ever the SMMEs, small businesses are also there, which means they compete with bigger businesses. That allows bigger business not to increase prices because they're faced by that competition. It can adapt more rapidly than a larger organization to changing preferences and trends. We continue. Often local resources are used which which has a triple effect in the development of other industries. It provides opportunities for aspiring entrepreneurs, especially those who are unemployed, underemployed, or retrenched. Workers at the smaller end of the scale often require limited or no skills or training. They learn on the job while they're already working. Subcontracting by large enterprises to SMMEs lends expansion to production processes. Whenever our small businesses are getting some contract in bigger businesses, they end up being exposed and they can grow easily because they tend to produce at the higher capacity to supply those larger businesses. It plays a vital or important role in technical and other innovation, which can lead to a world of successful, highly qualified competitors in future. That is SMM is being important. So evaluation of growth policies, so approaches. So since 1994, the economy has become more integrated into the global markets and has become a successful exporter of value-added goods and services. We know that since South Africa started by introducing the like of export promotion policies, it managed to attract more businesses to produce goods locally and sell them abroad, which has led to export-oriented growth in the economy. Public finances were established, public debts to GDP ratio decreased after that. Inflation brought down to a stable average between 3 to 6%. As we speak now, our inflation rate is at 3%, while our target is between 3 to 6%, meaning our inflation rate as we speak is at the minimum level. Remember that yesterday, the Governor of Reserve Bank intervened with MPC by reducing repo rate with a 0.25 basis point. Positive outcomes. Infrastructure development has produced growth in gross fixed capital formation. We know that South Africa is a world-class infrastructure, especially in bigger cities. So it has resulted to the increase in gross fixed capital formation. Introduction of local small businesses have seen improved local economic activities. Since we have had this funding for SMMEs, there have been increase in small businesses in South Africa, and there have been increase in productivity because we regard them as the future of South African economy. What is bad? The economy is unable to generate enough employment, resulting in the continuation of poverty and inequality. South African economy is still struggling to create enough opportunity that can also create more jobs for people. Majority of people are unemployed in South Africa as a part of labor force or economically active population. So that simply means these policies have not been that much effective to create sound jobs for South African people. That's why we still have this high level of unemployment and poverty as well as inequalities. The economy has grown consistently, but our economic growth rate are still below the growth rate experienced by other emerging economies or countries, lower than the population growth rate. So in the challenge that we are having as South Africa, the population growth rate has increased faster than the economic growth rate in South Africa. So that's a challenge alone, because that means the economic activities cannot be enough. Man available cannot be able to create enough job opportunities for those people that are in the country, because people are growing faster than the economy. For that reason, we face this challenge. Skill development system has not yet achieved its aims. Economy remains constrained by lack of skills, especially here. I'm not talking about the general skill. I'm talking about the likes of critical skills that are important for the country to function. We are still unable as a country to process our own minerals. We still export them as a raw material into the global market. That simply means our skill is not yet at the highest level because we are unable to produce our own or to convert or transform those minerals into final goods. Then we sell them abroad as finished goods. That's one of the challenges we are having. That's why it is a part of negative outcomes. Jobs have been created in some sectors but lost in other sectors. Unemployment rate remains high in South Africa, while we have these policies that we're aiming at improving employment opportunities in the country. South Africa struggles to attract FDIs. So you can come across a question one day when the examiner will be asking you, why is it difficult for South Africa to attract FDIs? Remember, in South African economy, there's too much government intervention. The company tax is at 28%, which makes it difficult for firms to enter the market and compete because there's too much government intervention. The state intervenes more often to regulate the market, while we know that the economy with more government regulation is problematic because it discourages investors from investing in South African economy. So we are failing to attract more FDIs because of infrastructure that is not enough. Also, inconsistency in terms of our what we call action rate or our currency is inconsistent, can appreciate and depreciate anytime. Also, we have an issue of what? We have an issue of less skills. So whenever businesses are willing to come into the country, they find themselves lacking basic skills that are required for our people so that they can produce and meet their economic objective in those businesses. So those are some challenges that we're having. Maybe also there is less government support or funding to those businesses. That's why they are not even willing to invest in South African economy. Also, the issue of crime. Most businesses are not willing to invest in South African economy because of trending crime that is going on in South Africa. We continue. Positive outcomes. So for development policies, the lives of millions of people have been improved in terms of provision of housing, access to basic services, gender equity, primary healthcare, as well as land reform. So as for development, they've been able to give people land that was lost forcefully during the apartheid. They've been able to provide proper housing, like RDP have been able to build houses for South African people that were deserving. Also, it's been able to reduce poverty, allowing people to have proper water supply as well as electricity in South Africa, even though we have an issue of inequalities. Social grants have been expanded to more than 15 million recipients. In South Africa, there's this program of social grants also under social security, where people are receiving the grants so that they can afford their basic living, from child support grant to old age pension. Every household is receiving about 6,000 liters of free water and 50 kilowatts of free electricity every month. It depends now in which area are you, because not everyone is receiving this electricity at the end of the month. Only deserving areas where there is a lower level of development are receiving such. Aims to economic equity are being addressed through progressive tax system and BBBEE, even though they have not been, these two policies, they have not been enough to ensure that we don't have economic inequalities. But government has been trying to ensure that it takes money or imposes tax from those people that are earning more and benefit the poor through benefits in natura and providing what we call the public goods and services. Number of people living in poverty has declined. However, the rate of decline is very low. As much as poverty have declined because there have even been social wages, those social wages or received funds are not enough to reduce poverty because they are below the poverty line. As much as the states have intervened to impose or regulate minimum wage law, that minimum wage is not enough to eradicate poverty in those areas or for those people. The money is not enough because our price level is too high for people to afford their basic needs. Total BBBEE transactions have increased. But what's the challenge on this one? The challenge on the BBBEE is that politicians have been using BBBEE as a tool to benefit themselves and their families. Deserving people in communities with those small businesses have not been rewarded. Even if they've been rewarded, there have been the bribery that have been going on to allow them to get some benefit or to have something, to have a stake in those investment or those funding that are given to smaller businesses. Negative outcomes. High level of youth unemployment result to high dependency rate. In South Africa, there is high level of dependency because youth is unemployed. They can go to varsity level and graduate, but they come out as and remain unemployed in South Africa, and that increases the dependency rate, which means one person is working in one family, working to support about 10 people. That increases the burden on dependents. High infant mortality rate has low life expectancy at birth. We have come across such whereby there's an infant mortality rate that has increased, and also life expectancy at birth has been an issue in South African economy and society. South Africa ranks low in terms of certain social indicators such as life expectancy at birth is too low and infant mortality rate is too high. So meaning children are dying at the at the younger age because some indicators are not met as as they've aimed to be achieved, so they are not met. We have infant mortality as well as under 5 mortality. So that means our healthcare facilities are not doing enough to prevent such, maybe because of malnutrition. Education has increased in terms of access, but not in terms of quality. Yes, education has been made accessible to almost everyone, even though at the varsity level is not accessible easily because of the registration fees, and also the NSFAS is not made available at the right time sometimes, which lead to people dropping out or students dropping out from universities. High level of income inequality increase in extra race inequality. So we still have an issue of high level of inequalities. South Africa is the country that is rated as the highest in terms of inequality in the world, because few people are having access to more economic resources while more people are having access to less economic resources. So we have many people sharing a loaf of bread while few people are sharing trillions in the country. That's a challenge. Then the next part is a north-south divide, where we believe now we are talking about the world stratification or division between developed and developing nations. I indicated at the beginning of the lesson that northern countries are located in the northern hemisphere, while southern countries are located in the southern hemisphere. However, we do have developed nations that are located in southern hemisphere. North-south divide is the economic division or world stratification between developed and developing nations within the world. So it is also called what we call a development gap or development continuum gap. That's when we discover the gap of development between countries. Countries are classified between developing and developed nations based on their economic performances as well as social performance in terms of social indicators. That's why it's important for the country to publish its economic indicators and social indicators so that the World Bank, United Nations, and IMF can be able to rate the country in terms of development as well as the growth. Developed countries are part of G7, countries which are regarded as first world countries in the economy. They're highly developed. The most effective developing countries are the part of G20. South Africa is a member of G20 in the world. Developed countries are believed to be in the northern hemisphere of the world, while developing countries are believed to be in the southern hemisphere of the world, like I've mentioned before. So the divide refers to the three unequal standard of living, globalization challenges, as well as the environment. This is discussed. Northern countries, in terms of the per capita income, northern countries are believed to be having high level of income per capita or income per person. People living in the north enjoy high income per person or per capita and can therefore afford more goods and services and experience high standard of living. They have decent jobs which pay them income that easily uplift their standard of living because the income is at the highest level. Life expectancy. In developed nations, individuals living in the northern hemisphere they have access to advanced and readily available healthcare, resulting in longer lifespan. They live longer. The access to advanced healthcare reduces diseases and make them easily sustain themselves. So for that reason, their life expectancy remains high in the north. Education. People living in the north are more literate and enjoy more years of schooling, which means they are highly skilled. This empowers them to earn high wages and salaries because their skills are very high. The average of developed nations or countries' citizens are educated and are more marketable. Per capita income. We talk about southern countries now or developing countries. How is the income per capita? Income per capita or per person in developing nations is very low because people are unemployed and countries are experiencing lower level of economic growth. People living in the south have lower level of real GDP per capita and can therefore afford less goods and services and experience low living standard, which can lead even to poverty within those countries. Lack of skills and training result to less earnings, less income earnings, which disable them from being civilized and earning the better living standard due to the fact that they are not educated, they have less income. Some of them live within condition of absolute poverty where they cannot afford even their basic needs. There's a high burden of on dependence in here because they depend more on those that are employed in families while they cannot be employed at all. The income they earn is below the poverty line, which means that some of them cannot afford their basic needs. These are the developing nations. The majority depends on government-free services as well as social transfers to earn living because they are not marketable, they are not employable. We continue. Life expectancy. For the developing countries or southern countries, it's very low. So individuals living in the south have access to less advanced healthcare, resulting to shorter lifespan and lower life expectancy. The majority depend on government public healthcare services, which at times is not enough due to high demand. Many diseases exist and people are more vulnerable as a result of malnutrition, HIV and AIDS, as well as chronic diseases such as diabetes and high blood pressure. Education. People living in the south are less literate and have few years for schooling. This limits their earning capacity and the supply of unskilled labor is very, very high. High level of unskilled labor results in low level of creativeness, innovation, and production. That's why in South Africa, we have an issue of being innovative. We don't invent the most because we lack relevant skills. And then we also lack enough or improved businesses. Then we talk about the globalization challenges. So these are the challenges that are faced by developing nations under globalization. So globalization is the worldwide interfacing or interaction of economies or of countries with the trade as the main important goal. And then the countries of the north maintain that globalization is progress. But many developing countries are disappointed with globalization in 3 areas, namely poverty. There's high level of poverty. Growth, they cannot grow effectively. And then trade, they cannot trade effectively. Then we have environmental issues. So poverty as a globalization challenge. There's a growing gap between rich and the poor, especially in African countries. So we are faced by an issue of an absolute as well as relative poverty in developing countries because some people are employed, but majority of people are not employed. Businesses that are in there are infants. Also, high level of population make it difficult for firms that are infants to create enough job opportunities. The only continent that has experienced an increase in number of desperately poor people is sub-Saharan Africa. The constant increase in population size becomes an issue because now we have less growth and more population. If there's less growth opportunities and more population, that means economic activities cannot be enough. Income earned by the country cannot create enough opportunities for that population. That create poverty. Industries in developing countries have less capacity to employ the excessively increasing population size because they are still infant industries. They even lack subsidies from the government as well as incentives. Growth, the growth policy, the growth challenge. Growth remains as a major challenge for developing countries in globalization for the following reasons. They struggle to attract the foreign direct investments. So it is difficult for developing nations to attract FDIs because those countries are seen not as a good environment for investment because those businesses or those FDIs cannot get more returns on their investments. Also, social instabilities remains also one of the challenges. Developing countries have less productive capacity compared to developed nations. They produce less goods because they lack capital, those countries. Remember, for them to get capital or machinery, they have to import from developed nations, which is relatively expensive. Their manufacturing sector is not well industrialized. It faces capital and technical challenges or constraints. Industries in the South are classified as infant industries with high cost of production per unit, which has resulted in them struggling to increase their industrial base. Why are we unable to trade effectively? Because as countries, we are depending on what we call on agriculture. We are depending on farming. So rich countries continue to subsidize their agricultural production, making it difficult for developing countries to compete, while insisting that developing countries eliminate tariffs on manufactured goods. So we are being manipulated. The trade is unfair. We are not able to trade effectively because, firstly, developed nations are imposing more trade restrictions on our goods and services to be exported to them because they believe that our goods are the product of dumping. Like USA has simply imposed 30% of tariffs to South Africa. It will be difficult for us to trade effectively with USA because our goods will be made more expensive in USA, meaning there will be lower demand from USA consumers. Because of their competitive advantages, especially in labor and technology, some developing countries found the great advantage in the globalization. Most of the world poor countries have a very little foreign trade as they have less to offer. They depend on less value-added goods or less value-added resources, which are not transformed to the final goods and services. For that reason, they have less to offer in the globalization. They don't have enough resources to produce goods to be exported. Instead, they import goods which can lead to POP deficit. And then developing countries are faced by the issue of weak currencies. Their currencies are very much weak. So when they want to import goods, they import them at the higher cost. When they want to export goods, they sell them at the higher cost, which does not benefit them because when you import and export, as you export, you need to earn the income that is enough for you to pay for import. But should you have less income and on exports, then you pay more money on imports, then there's a challenge in there. You will find yourself faced by an issue of deficit. Their exports become relatively cheap in developed countries while imports become expensive. Developing countries are more dependent on natural resources or primary sector resources to export, meaning they sell these goods at the lower cost and receive them back as finished goods at the higher cost, meaning they are being manipulated by developed nations. So developing nations or countries are manipulated in the globalization since they export their raw materials cheap and receive them back as finished goods being so expensive. Trade agreements. So we have an issue of trade agreements here. In globalization, they favor developed countries since they own key inputs such as capital and technology. So they manipulate developing nations to decrease their tariffs while they charge high tariffs against developing nations. So environment. What is done by northern countries to cause environmental destruction or damages? So these are economies of mass consumption and they burn mass of fossil fuels such as oil and coal. So developed nations are burning more fossil fuels in the globalization. As they do that in the world, they are producing emissions or greenhouse gases that are spreading over to the atmosphere and damage ecosystem as well as ozone layer. What is the effect of that? The effect of that is there will be what we call the global warming and the climate change. There will be severe drought, there will be more floods happening in developing nations the most, which becomes a challenge because it threatens the crop production, it threatens human life as well as what we call plants, including animals' lives. So this burning of fossil fuel by developed nations is the problem. Some of them, they are selling their waste to developing nations and they pay for selling such a waste into the developing nations. We have an issue of chemical waste that is wasted into running oceans, which becomes an issue because it kills animals and plants as well as human beings that are using that water. The resulting carbon dioxide causes damage in the ozone layer. Heat trapped under the greenhouse blanket cause changes in weather patterns. The developing countries of Africa are affected more than the countries in the north that cause pollution. In northern countries. So Kyoto Protocol required countries to reduce their greenhouse gases, but it lapsed in 2012. The conference of the parties, number COP17, did not manage to reach an agreement to continue with the protocol. Major environmental challenges faced by North include air pollution, water pollution, noise pollution, and toxic waste, which is known as the hazardous waste, as well as chemical waste, which is dangerous to human lives, animals, and plants. Southern countries, they focus on agriculture, so they exploit more on agriculture and also mineral beneficiation, for which soil condition, adequate rainfall, and the health of crops are very important. Degradation and depletion of land, water, and vegetation are the main environmental problems faced by whom? By developing nations. The inability of these countries to produce sufficient food is the cause of hunger and malnutrition in these countries. This impacts very negatively on the supply of agricultural produces. It becomes difficult because if ever there's a drought, farmers will have to pay extra cost for irrigation system in the country. As they do so, they produce at the higher cost and sell at the higher cost. If ever there are floods, that simply means crops will be washed away and the little can be able to grow because of floods. So for that reason, there will be less crop production and harvest in the developing nations. Who is the main cause of this? The cause of these are developed nations. Then we move to the assessment. Our lesson is over. Then we check assessment. Start the extract as a data response below and answer questions that follow. National Development Plan, Vision 2030, our future, make it work. South Africa's principal challenge is to roll back poverty and inequality. Raising living standard to the minimum level proposed in the plan will involve improved education. The NDP focuses on critical capabilities needed to transform the economy and society through increased economic growth, adapted from NDP. What challenge must South Africa address by 2030 according to the extract? And then roll back poverty and inequality. In the extract above, identify one way in which South Africa could minimize the challenge it faces. Improve education. Briefly describe the term economic growth. Economic growth is the increase in the productive capacity, the increase in production of goods and services, or the increase in real GDP of the country over a period of time. What economic benefit will the implementation of NDP, National Development Plan, have in the economy? Reduce youth unemployment, so people will get jobs. Provide young people with broader opportunities. Increase the competitiveness, competitive capacity of the economy, and then improve standard of living of people, increase the pace of industrialization. How can poverty and inequality be addressed in South Africa? So poverty and inequality can be addressed by improving sufficiency and effectiveness of provision of services, distributing resources more fairly, improving the education standards, creating employment opportunities in the country through EPWP, providing the cash benefits, e.g. social grants, and then awareness program, e.g. family planning. Changing of labor laws, e.g. BE Employment Equity, like it has changed to be amended Employment Equity Act. How do countries with high economic divide negatively impact on countries with low economic divide? More developed countries have a tendency of dumping unwanted goods on low developed countries, thereby retarding their industrial development. Most developed economies are characterized by multinational industries who dominate the international market, meaning they sell goods at the lower cost and they produce at the lower cost and sell at the lower cost, while those of developed nations are producing at the higher cost and sell at the higher cost. They are faced by an issue of these economies of scale. Most developed countries are guilty of exploiting resources of less developed countries to meet their high demand. We continue. 8 marks now questions. How can South African standard of living related how can unequality sort of living related to the North divide be addressed? So creating surplus on GDP that countries can save and invest in their economies, leading to high standard of living. Increasing the per capita income in developing countries in the South through increased foreign investment, leading to increased economic growth. Focusing on large-scale industrial activities and a wide variety of service where more people could be involved in economic activities, leading to a rise in income levels. We continue. The government contributing more by raising more taxes to provide better services. Increasing the life expectancy of developing countries suffering from diseases and ill health through the intervention of developed countries where the latest research and techniques are practiced. Focusing on the fight against malnutrition and serious illnesses like HIV and AIDS, diabetes, as well as high blood pressure. We continue. Increasing the standard of education through effecting interaction with the relevant parties involved in human development, making available the level and effectiveness of education as expressed by the adult literacy rate. And then we go to the summary of our lesson. So the South African government initiated the growth and development policies as a mechanism to redress imbalances of the past, increase employment, fast-track the provision of basic needs, and improve skill acquisition. This was done by growth and development policies, where the state intervened by formulating some policies with the aim of economic transformation and social transformation, economic redress, whereby the face of the economy and society had to change now during the democracy, allowing people or black people that were marginalized to have a stake in the economy instead of continuously being sidelined to participate fairly and effectively in the economic mainstream. The wealth division between developed and developing countries is regarded as a North-South divide. So here we have some challenges because developed nations are the ones that are causing most of environmental problems for the developing nations. As they produce goods and services, they burn fossil fuels. They run away from adapting to the latest technology they have produced because they believe it is very much expensive to have a transition from the other way of production to another method of production. Like we already have what we call electrical vehicles, but they are not used. Firms are still using, they're still burning fossil fuels. They're still selling cars that are burning fossil fuel, like using petrol or the diesel. So that becomes a challenge because that is posing more environmental issues to developing nations. Also, we have some challenges that are faced by these developing nations, which include even poverty, trade, and growth. Northern countries are highly developed with high economic capacity, while southern countries are less developed with less economic capacity. So why are northern countries highly developed? Those countries have invested more in infrastructure development, have invested more in education, allowing their people to be well equipped so that they can be innovative and creative. That has led to them growing faster. They have a large productive capacity, high economic growth. Their labor is efficient. It produces more goods at the lower cost per unit, allowing them to have high level of economic growth. While developing nations are faced by an issue of lower capacity. Why? They lack capital that is required for them to produce goods and services. Having to import machinery is too expensive for them because they buy machines from developed nations. They don't produce machines on their own because they lack inventors to establish those machines. So that becomes a challenge for developing nations because they find themselves having to beg from developed nations every time. Their technology is outdated. They take time to adapt to the new technology because having to get to new technology is too expensive for them. So those are some of the challenges. So northern countries have huge contribution to environmental deterioration in the world as their production methods burn fossil fuels. They use coal, they use the fuel or petrol as they produce. So that one is also a problem because developing nations find it difficult to survive as they depend more on agriculture and farming. So this is causing what we call the climate change, global warming. As the pollution is increasing faster, we come across a situation whereby weather patterns are not manageable. We find that there's too much heat temperatures as a part of global warming. And then also we have too cold weather that cannot favor the crop production. Remember, developing nations are depending on minerals and what we call agriculture. If ever there is a drought or flood, which is a part of climate change, there won't be crop production. People will be dying of hunger. If ever developing nations are over extracting minerals so that they can be earning income from other countries, that becomes a challenge also for them, because these minerals are not renewable. They can be depleted. They're exploitative. If they get to be completed, then they will never be recovered. That's why there must be sustainable use of some resources, because should they be completed, they can never be recovered. At the same time, benefit enjoyed by the current generation can never be discovered by the future generation. That also one of our challenges that we are having. It is caused by high demand of developed nations as they demand more minerals from developing nations. So our minerals, as they are sold to developed nations, they are sold being less value added. They have not been transformed to final goods and services, but as we receive them as finished goods, they've been transformed and they are very much expensive, which becomes a problem for us now. Then we cannot trade easily, we cannot grow easily. One of the challenges is poverty that developing nations are facing in the globalization. They are faced by the poverty because there is a lack of family planning in developing nations. There's a high birth rate over economic growth rate. So people are growing faster than income they have. So that income they earn under economic growth is not enough to cater for everyone. Then some people find themselves without job opportunities. Businesses that are in those countries are still infants. They're weak. They cannot grow anytime. They are less industrialized. They lack capital. They lack machinery to produce. For that reason, they remain with less capacity. So it becomes more challenging for them to grow and to expand under globalization. It becomes more challenging for them to be able to reduce this poverty that they are having. Why then we attract less industries? We attract less industries from the global market because the government intervention is too much in South Africa. There is too much high taxation. There is too much red tape that is indicated or imposed by the government in South African economy, which lead to businesses finding it not healthy to invest in South African economy. If we don't have FDIs, that means we have less job being created. Then that will mean high level of unemployment will remain as a major challenge for South African people and other developing nations. And then that will lead to no or less income. That will lead to more dependence on the government support, meaning the government need to print more money to be available or need to borrow more money from foreign organizations to finance its spending on what? On provision of public goods and services, which some of them are community goods, which are free of charge. Benefits in natura, providing some public goods free to people so that they can be able to meet their basic needs. Providing social transfers to people so that they can be able to earn primarily income to earn that basic living. So we have that challenge. So there is more dependence on the government caused by high level of population in these countries that are developing. And then southern countries have less to offer. So they can offer less in the globalization. They don't have enough capacity. They don't have enough capital. They don't transform their minerals or natural resources. They sell them as primary resources, which becomes a challenge for them to function easily under globalization. So the preview of the next lesson, it will be regional development. It will be next week on the 8th of August, 14:30. The lesson will be starting up to 16 hours. Now, what will be covered on that lesson? Firstly, under regional development or industrial development, we will be focusing on industrial development policies as well as industrial development strategies. We have 2 strategies and 2 policies. And then we'll also move our focus to approaches, industrial development approaches as well as industrial development. I mean, both of them, they're 2, the approaches. So they don't have much marks. So maximum can be 10 marks if they appear in the examination. From then we'll be moving to regional development, focusing on the aims of regional development. So we'll be checking now that if ever we centralize economic activities and improve our regions, what is it that we are going to achieve? From then we'll be moving to South African endeavors to regional development. Those are South African approaches that are used to achieve regional development or industrial development, where we'll be talking about the industrial development zones, IDZ, which are believed to be purposely built industrial estate that are physically enclosed to seaports and airports. Their main aim is to ensure that they attract FDIs, they promote export-oriented economic growth, they create job opportunities, they promote and create world-class infrastructure. Then we'll also talk about the SDIs, the Spatial Development Initiatives, which are all about the strategy that is interdepartmental, controlled by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, as well as Department of Transport, that aims at improving economic livelihood of areas that are neglected, where there's a high level of unemployment and poverty. So we'll be checking the aims of SDIs, which is mainly to improve infrastructure development, also to create job opportunities in underdeveloped areas, and then also to prevent imbalances from emerging, also to attract and promote the public-private partnership, meaning allowing public sector to join forces with the private sector, etc. Then we'll move to what we call SEZ, the special economic zones, which are believed to be geographical areas that have been set aside to perform specific economic activities. So SEZs will be compared to ITZs. We normally say SEZ have the larger scope or wide scope because they can be found anywhere. They have wide range of incentives. Also, they attract even FDIs, including even smaller businesses. They don't only attract exporters like ITZ, they attract a wide range of businesses. They can lead to economic diversity because there will be a variety of goods produced in that particular area. And then at the same time, we will talk about the likes of corridors. Remember, if we talk about corridors, we mean the track of land that forms the passageway that allow the access from one point to another. We talk about the transport system corridors, which allows transport system to move from one point to another. In there, we have two types of corridors, which are corridors within and corridors beyond the South African borders. If we talk about corridors within South African borders, we mean those that will be moving or networking people and goods and services within the country. If we talk about those that are beyond, we refer to those that are networking South Africa to other countries, like the Maputo Development Corridor. It's connecting South Africa with Maputo and other African countries. For that reason, we say that's a corridor beyond South African borders. From then, we'll be jumping to talk about the best practices of regional benchmarks. So we'll be checking that if we want to achieve the industrial benchmark or regional benchmark, which are the best practices that should be in place? There should be competitiveness, there should be partnerships, there should be good governance, there should be free market orientation, there should be sustainability, there should be provision of resources, there should be human resource development, there should be decentralization. Those are the things that are important that will be discussed. And then also the last thing that we'll discuss next week will be what we call the incentives to promote industrial development. So after all, I thank you. I believe next week you will be enjoying the lesson under industrial development. Remember, this content we are doing is mainly based on on economic pursuit, which is a part of our paper 1. Can be a part of question 1 for 15 marks. It will be for 15 marks. Question 3 for 40 marks. Question 4 for 20 marks. Question 6 for how many marks? For 40 marks. I thank you. Let's meet again next week at the same time and same place.